Hello, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, good. Well, I'm happy to continue with my reflection on possibilities of intellectual exchange in 1970s in our region. And for my presentation, I chose a very rare and I believe to most of you unknown edition of Samizdat, created or edited by Petr Rezek in 1970s, which we actually have at our research center. All right. Recent research of activities behind Iron Curtain involved many facets. One of them was special ways of communication through manifestos, mail art, or Samizdat. Certain key figures were active hubs in the network, avoiding censorship through many different imaginative ways. In her book, Networking the Block, Clark and Welsh mentions, for example, Alex Mlynarczyk, Jaroslav Kozlovsky, Klaus Groch, Georgi Galantaj, or Petr Štembera. We know how important role was played by theoreticians like László Beke, Jindřich Chaloupecký, Jiří Valoch, Anna Maria Potocká, and many others in communicating important information through the Iron Curtain and within the block. Today, I would like to mention one persona which is internationally almost unknown, but played important role in intellectual exchange about conceptualism and progressive art trends in 1970s in Czechoslovakia. It is a philosopher, aesthetician, and psychologist, Petr Rezek, whose Samizdat edition published between 1978 and 1982 can serve as an example of those days' knowledge and interests behind the Iron Curtain. It was especially important because Czechoslovakia was in the 1970s in a very peculiar situation called normalization. After the invasion of the Warsaw Pact forces in 1968, the new political garniture took over the power. It was a period that saw a radical turnaround of the censorship, media, and gallery operation. Both art magazines published by Union of Czechoslovak Artists ceased to exist. The reorganization of the union was aimed at excluding most of the artists active in the liberal 1960s, so most of the Czechoslovak art scene suddenly became part of the unofficial area. This involved an ongoing search for alternative presentational formats. One of them was, of course, Samizdat, which in the Czech art world replaced the role of non-existing magazines and became a source of information about contemporary art production and theories from Forbidden West, but also about invisible unofficial art scene. Petr Rezek's Samizdat edition consists of 40 square format notebooks with typewritten text and imprinted or glued in black and white photographs. Individual notebooks are devoted to contemporary themes of artists or artists. One can find original version of text, Rezek text in some of them, as well as many translations from different sources. Original of this unique Samizdat edition are preserved in the archive of VVP Research Center at the Academy of Fine Arts in Prague. They show the extraordinary orientation of Petr Rezek in the topical art of the 1970s and his will to share it with the unofficial artistic and intellectual circles. The very first notebook is devoted to happening and includes Rezek's text Happening jako vzpomínka, happening as a memory, dated 1978, accompanied by quotes of definitions of happening by different artists and theoreticians, for example, Alan Kapro, Klaus Odenburg, Milan Knížák, Wolf Vostels, and others. The final part of the notebook is devoted to a short chronology of the beginnings of the happening in the USA. On the last page, we can find bibliographic informations on quotations and a list of illustrations. There are actually 5 of them. Among others, there's photo of Capro, Cage, and Vostel. Otherwise, there are no other information, no date, no editor's name, nothing, which is understandable, since the publishing of such a Samizdat could be criminalized in those days, or at least call attention of secret police. The following notebook is devoted to Karl André, continued by famous and controversial travelogue by Milan Knížák, which he wrote during his trip to USA in 1969, when he cooperated with Fluxus artists. In 1978, Rezek also published another notebook with Knížák texts and manifestos. Along that, he dedicated another issue to body art and land art, or artists like Anne Darboven or Christo. It is obvious that he was involved with Czech progressive circles, not just Milan Knížák, but, for example, artist and theoretician Karel Miller, who translated text by Monte Young, or Gerta Pospíšilová, ex-director of House of Arts in Brno and partner of Jiří Valoch, who translated manifesto The New Art of Making Books by Ulises Carrion, famous Mexican conceptualist. In 1979, Rezek published issues on performance and artist books, along with monographic samizdats devoted to Newman, Johns, Morris, Meach, Akonchi, or Vostel. After the break, which he spent by compiling an anthology for Jindřich Chalupecky's 70th anniversary, Rezek edited notebooks on John Cage, Josef Beuys, Robert Smithson, Eva Hesse, Minimal Art, and Fluxus in 1981. The final year of the edition, which is concluded with Index, is dedicated to concept art. Very interesting correspondence of Fluxus, obviously from Milan Knížák's archive, and Yves Klein and Andy Warhol, among others. We can see that Rezek drew up his edition a certain unit. The final 40th notebook actually consists of content of whole edition, including index of names and text. From today's perspective, it is interesting to see what were the choices of the themes and artistic personalities made by Rezek. We can assume that the choice was often accidental, depending on the context and recommendations from Rezek circles. Also, the selection of text sometimes seems random, without information of the sources of the original text. Valuable are Rezek's essays written around certain phenomena, which he was trying to understand from his specific position of phenomenology philosopher. We can name, for example, documented art, already mentioned happening as memory, or encounters with action artists, which is included in the anthology primary documents. To my knowledge, only Rezek's text published in English. In this text, he describes first body art performances by Petr Štembera and Jan Močoch like they were not actions, but a dream. Thereby, he opens new possibilities of interpretation of action art and influenced Czechoslovak theory of these conceptual approaches immensely. Most of the texts published in his Samizdat edition were in 1982 included in his book Body, Thing, and Reality in Contemporary Art. It is the book on the left. This book was published by Jazzová sekce, jazz section, organization registered under the Association of Czechoslovak Musicians. Thanks to the jazz section, could publish international materials for internal members' use without censorship, even during the normalization. Thanks to Joska Skalník and Karel Srb, a number of alternative public publications on conceptual and current art were semi-legally published at the turn of 1970s and 1980s in Czechoslovakia, before the organization was banned and main protagonists criminalized. Along the Rezek's book, Karel Srb published 2 volumes of anthology Minimal, Earth, and Concept Art, which introduced K-American artists from the second half of the 1960s to the Czech audience. Even the title is in English, the entire book is in Czech. We can find some personalities like Karel Andre, Robert Smithson, or Robert Morris introduced in this book. And they also appear in a Rezek Samizdat edition. If we compare the selection, we can see that Rezek tried to cover more actual movements and shifts in the artistic creation in 1970s. What is interesting is the fact that Srb's anthologies include more translations of the text with bibliographic information. Thanks to this, we can see sources which were floating around Czechoslovak intellectual circuit, along with articles from the magazines like Art Forum, Avalanche, Studio International, Data, Art Magazines, Art International, mostly from 1960s. So we can assume that these magazines were still accessible at some of the Prague libraries from the more liberal days. We can find also references to Lucy Lippard, 6 Years, which was published in 1973. Since the images of the artists were taken from the catalog when attitudes become form, it is also obvious that famous Bern exhibition was widely known among these circles. The sources after 1970 are rare in Rezek's edition, but they exist. For example, in the notebook devoted to Yves Klein, Rezek included translation of the current article from Art Forum 1982. However, it is important to compare Rezek's Samizdats also with those days' official magazines. When we look through Výtvarná kultura, Visual Culture magazine, which the only official magazine, which was published from 1977, it is obvious what a huge gap Rezek was trying to cover. His mission was obviously to continue the progressive intellectual exchange, which was present in Czechoslovakia in 1960s. But what could 4 transcripts of each Rezek Samizdat notebook do in the wasteland of Czechoslovak millions population? It is evident that his efforts could reach only a narrow circle of privileged members of the unofficial scene and those interested and also brave enough. Petr Rezek studied philosophy, aesthetics, and psychology at the turn of 1960s.
Pavlina, I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but I can't see moving your images. I thought it's only my screen, as I haven't seen the large screen before.
Oh,
but
really?
now Zsofia wrote me that she doesn't see it also. So I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but before you have prepared it, so
something's really wrong with this sharing. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Now it's good.
Oh, okay.
Maybe we can come back to these other slides during our discussion,
okay.
because it's really pity
Okay. All right, I am just sort of in the end of my presentation, then I can show you the images of the Samizdat. I'm really sorry about this. I don't know why it's not sharing properly. Okay, so now I just want to quickly actually introduce the personality of Petr Rezek, and then I will show you the Samizdat. Petr Rezek studied philosophy, aesthetics, and psychology at the turn of 1960s and 1970s. He was a pupil of influential philosopher Jan Patočka, who was at the 1968 called to lecture at the Faculty of Arts and Charles University, and in 1972 forced to retire. Patočka was later one of the spokesmen of the Charta 77, and Rezek one of the signatories. Due to the persecution of the dissident circles, Rezek could work only in non-professional jobs in 1970s and 1980s. We can perceive his Samizdat edition also as an attempt to continue his intellectual and aesthetic interests, despite the unfavorable conditions. Along his publishing activities, he was very active in underground lecturing on philosophy, psychology, and aesthetics, all through the normalization. Between 1977 and 1978, he also organized a series of secret exhibitions in his apartment. One of them was the presentation of Karel Miller's body art performances. This was essentially the first and, as of yet, last solo retrospective of the artist. Other Czech artists like Václav Boštík, Stanislav Kolíbal, or Zdeněk Palcer exhibited at Rezek's apartment, but only documentation of Miller's exhibition is known. Several photographs preserved in the artist's archive attest to the atmosphere and form of this extraordinary situation. The seriousness of the gallery-style installation and the exhibition concept sharply contrast with the ordinariness and intimacy of the apartment. The exhibition lasted 14 days, and according to Miller's recollections, did not have any official opening. Only a few close friends saw it. There's no time here to present Petr Rezek's complex personality and activities. For example, since 1980s, he was involved in reviewing opera under the pseudonym Caruso in Samizdat magazines and later in official magazines. And in 1990s, he systematically translated antique philosophers like Plotinos from ancient Greek. His editorial activities, along with lecturing on several universities, flourished all through the end of the millennium. Petr Rezek played a key role on the Czech art scene in 1970s. He was a close friend to many dissident thinkers and progressive artists who were developing conceptual, performative, and other alternative approaches in their work. This paper is an attempt to present the nearly internationally unknown but exceptional figure of Petr Rezek and his role in the development of progressive art trends in Czechoslovakia. It is also a reflection upon the sources of information contemporary artists had during the 1970s. The limited circulation of ideas was one of the features of that time, which paradoxically was a time of bold experimentation. So now let me show you the Samizdat edition. So this is just part of it. As I said, it's 40 notebooks. They have different graphic design and also different bounding, but as I said, there were 4 copies, so we have a mixture of these types, but they all keep the same format, and in a way they keep similar graphic design, which of course is based on typewritten text. So this is how looks the binding, and as I said, there is no information about the date, author of the edition, anything. And this is the overview of all 40 notebooks with the years, how I reconstructed it according to some bibliographic informations. So this is how it proceeded. And here are few examples of the notebooks I was talking about. You can see how the design varies through the years. And here is the last notebook index, a Rejstřík index, where you can see really the list of all the notebooks, and also the list of all the texts and names. And here is Rezek's book, Body, Think, and Reality in Contemporary Art, and next to it is the anthology compiled by Karel Srb I was talking about, which was, both of these books were published by Jazz Section in 1982, during that time when they were able to publish uncensored materials for their members, and distributed it just among the members, but the books were actually really professionally published. And this was just an example to compare the attempts of the unofficial art scene with the official magazine, which was the only art magazine published from 1977. And here, I believe you already saw it. So I'm sorry about the technical issues, and I'm looking forward to other presentation and of course the discussion. Thank you.